day, guys. I hope you're having a wonderful week. I hope it's going well for you. We have had a good stretch of beautiful sunny weather. Uh, According to the forecast that I've been looking at, I think around this weekend, sometime or another, there is some rain possibly moving in, and we could use some. Uh, just looking, I've been out looking at my garden here at home. It could use some rain on it. I mean, it could not use rain. Rephrase that. It could use a little drier weather on it. Um, but I need to get in there. It could use some rain after I plow it. Let me rephrase that. And so, uh, that's kind of the plan there. I've got to get in there with my tiller and try to break it up and get it to where I can work it. But it is drying out, considerably, considering how it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm encouraged by that. Our onions are starting to really take off and grow now. I've put a little nitrogen on those to try to put them in gear, so to speak. So we hope that we can see some results from that. And this morning, we had a cool morning here. It was like 27, and I went over to my father-in-law's over at the big garden and all, and we worked on the 140. I hope we've got that figured out. Turns out there was a pin missing in the front end of the front lift arm, and I don't know why it hadn't fell out before now, but this first time I've really had that tractor out doing anything with it much in several years. So I don't know what's happened, how come it to be gone, but anyway, it is. So that's where we're at with that. So anyway, we want to get into our talk time here in just a moment, but before I do want to say thank you to all of my subscribers, and appreciate each one of you, and I appreciate all of your comments. I can't emphasize that enough. So, and I just appreciate reading each one, and so thank you, and keep that up, please. And so anyway, had one, she posted a comment on my last video. I think she's somewhere along the line said she had boxed up and sent some sunshine from Florida up to North Carolina, wanting to know if I got it. And yes, we got it. So thank you so much for that. So anyway, we want to get into our talk time today, and kind of on the same thought that we were on last week. We were talking about, I'd asked the question, have we been disconnected? And so I kind of want to stay along in the lines of that, but let's talk more about being connected. We kind of finished up on that, reconnecting ourselves, with our family and our friends and loved ones and whatnot. But really, I think what I've got to say today would probably be more important than that. And I say that we should be trying to make sure that we're staying connected with God. I'm not talking about salvation here. If you're saved, born again, that's one connection that you make, but is maintaining a fellowship with Him. And one thing that I thought about as I was, I've been pondering this all week, really. The first time in the Word of God where we see man mentioned, really, God brings him into the picture in Genesis chapter 2, really. And we see that God, the first place that we find in the Word of God, God placing man is in a garden. And, I've thought about, there's several avenues that, I've thought on this a lot today. And I was going to make this earlier this morning, and we run into that with a tractor, so I kind of messed my plans up there. But anyway, being in a garden, that's where I have the most peace at, and I feel so close to God, probably as close to God anywhere outside of being in His house. But I feel close to Him when I'm in a garden. Now, I'm not, don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not telling everybody to quit their jobs and grab them a hoe and go to the garden. That's not what I'm saying. Even if you're having a small garden, if you just have something like what, I've got these tubs that are sitting here on this deck, and, right now they've got onions in them. But if you're doing nothing but growing something in a tub on your back porch, or, you know, if that's your place, if that's all you've got, make the best of it and spend that time to connect with God in devotion. There is just so much benefit that can be brought from that. And in thinking of that, I know this kind of gets interesting, but I thought about a lot of our sports, and I don't want to go into a lot of the background and the history of that, but in talking about our sports, a lot of that can find its origins, I think, around Athens, Greece. Um, in that part of the world, um, that's where I think a lot of that began. I remember studying in school. There's a little town uh, just out not far from Athens. It was called Marathon, and the actual term that we refer to as marathon in a race, that distance uh, from, I think it's Athens, I'm not mistaken, but the distance between there and Marathon is what we know as a marathon race today. There was a guy during that time, he ran that distance and died when he got to Marathon, if I remember it right. Uh, that's just a little history lesson. But all of our sports, and talking about that, if you'll notice, even something like golf, where are they located? They're located out on a green landscape. And I remember in school when we first got computers, this is back in the early 80s when they were in their beginning stages, and we had the Apple computer. And basically, it was nothing like what you see today. I mean, don't even hold a candle to what we have today. And all it was just really a blank screen with writing on it, letters, and you could type in, a letter. And back then we had a little old thing called print shop, and you could uh, make little cards and pictures and things like that. And it was kind of a pixelated picture. It wasn't really nothing fancy, but that's what we had, back in those days. But the letter actually was green. Now, I think, if I remember right, that could be changed. You could change the brightness of it, but I can't remember if you could actually change the color, because all I ever remember seeing was green. But the studies that they did on that, the reason they came up with that color was so that they picked that color green because it is soothing and calming to the eyes. And you know, what color do you primarily see when you're in a garden? You see the color green. And that's part of God's creation. And I feel for a lot of people today that are not in that kind of environment. They may not have access to that. But I do know this, that in a lot of towns, I know our local town here and some of the neighboring towns, they are investing in parks and places called greenways. The town, down where we go to church, they recently did a park. They made a little green spot out there, a place where people can go and walk and sit. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't have a garden of your own, you know, maybe those places could be available to you. Now, I'm just speaking, you know, as here in North Carolina. I'm sure there's other areas of the country that's probably that way. But if you're in other countries watching me, I don't know, you know, what you have, but I do know those things are available. But I think it's very important that we get connected back to nature because, guys, you can cut off all the electronics, all the noise, all the racket, and get somewhere where it's quiet. You know what people can't hear? They can't hear God. They can't think clearly. They stay agitated, upset, angry. I could just go on and on and on. It's because they can't get alone and get some quiet time. And you know, it's interesting to know this, that on the sixth day, if I remember right, God created man. And then he had to rest a whole day after doing that. And maybe something said for that, I don't know. But, you know, that was his day of rest on that seventh day. And God rested from all of his labors. And then we find God placing man in the garden, and he put him there for a purpose. Now, with this said, let's talk about that garden for just a little bit. I don't believe that God put him there to do like I'm doing right now, sit in a rocking chair and admire all the beauty. No, the Bible specifically says that he put him there to dress it and keep it and tend it. And no doubt he was harvesting fruit from it. And, you know, so what did he do in that garden? Well, one thing, I don't believe he had bugs. I don't believe he had to deal with drought, because the Bible spoke that during that time a mist came up from the earth, which was basically dew, and that watered the landscape. It watered the garden. And then we read also, you know, that there were headwaters from the 4 rivers that provided, you know, water for that garden. So I don't know exactly how that was set up. I've watched several videos, especially recently, on YouTube, and really there's not a good explanation that I've been able to see other than just the water sources. And there's speculation as to where that actual garden was at. I just know that the Bible said God put a flaming sword, if I remember right, and it turned all sorts of directions that nobody could go back to it. So it's gone. So, you know, that's pretty much all we have is what the Bible, you know, spoke of. But in talking about the Garden of Eden, I don't believe there was an issue of water in that garden. I don't believe there was an issue of insects and bugs and deer and all this other. I don't believe he had that problem. But no doubt he probably had to go in and maybe prune. You know, he probably had to trellis up, you know, plants to give them something to run on. But just think of what that was like, guys. I mean, literally, no sin had entered the world at that time. So there was nothing. I mean, the plants had nothing to stop them from growing. The ground was nutrient full. I mean, there was plenty of nutrients for all the vegetation to grow on. They hadn't been depleted. And so, I mean, just think of what that was like. That was an actual oasis on this earth. And there was no curse on nothing during that time. So therefore, you know, he had the perfect environment. Now, we don't have that today. I know all of us strive to We try to put as many nutrients as we can in our soil to get it to produce the best fruit. And and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You know, I don't believe in putting all these chemicals and pesticides and sprays and stuff. I mean, if we can get away from that, the better off we'll be. But guys, you can keep all of that out of your ground as best you can, but you're still not going to have the Garden of Eden. It's just not going to happen because God said He's cursed this land, He's cursed the ground, He's cursed every bit of it, and we're just not going to have that. We're going to have to toil, we're going to have to sweat. He said, by the sweat of our face. And that's the way it's going to be for us. And we're going to get aggravated. I mean, we're literally going to get aggravated. And that's just part of it. But but that don't mean we quit having a garden, because if you quit, you don't eat. Now, let me kind of rephrase what I said there. You might not be in your garden like what I've got out here, but your place of work, where you provide an income, where you provide for your family, if you quit that, that's not necessarily your garden, so to speak. But if you quit that, then you don't eat. We've got a lot of people today that's quitting. And when I say quitting, they're quitting to the place that they're expecting somebody else to hand it to them. Now, there's one thing: if you're not physically able to work, that's a whole nother matter. I'm not talking about that. But we've got able-bodied people out here that are not doing nothing. They're not even putting a pinto bean in the ground to try to get another one to come up. And, we've got to do that. We've got to labor, whatever it is. So that is part of reconnecting ourselves, maybe even just reconnecting with ourselves to some degree. But let me get back on topic and get back to the garden. I think there's great peace in having a garden. I know I do. I know I get a lot of peace from it. I get a lot of comfort from just being in a garden. And knowing, when I work full time, and I would come home from work. Back then I was working night shift, and I would come home of the morning. The first thing I wanted to do was to grab me a cup of coffee and head out to my garden and walk through it and see what needed to be gathered or what needed to be tended to, and if there was any plowing that needed to be done, or cultivating or weeding or whatever. I always look forward to that, because I just got great joy. And you go out there and you would work and you would toil in it and get the weeds out and cultivate it, and then just stand back and admire how beautiful God's creation looked. There's just something rewarding about that. So, guys, that's pretty much what I've got today, and I hope that somebody will be encouraged by it. And so anyway, find you some plants. If you don't do nothing but just put you some containers on your back porch or on a patio that you can grow something. And something that I have seen, I've thought about, me and my wife's talked about, maybe getting some, is these green stalks, the vertical planters. And I've thought about that. And my wife loves strawberries. And we've heard that strawberries grow exceptionally well in those. And so, that's some things that we're tossing through our mind, because I'm just looking, with the issue that we've had with rain this year, the gardens are really becoming, I don't want to say obsolete or useless, but it's almost a gamble. And So I'm looking at other ways, maybe to do things. So anyway, that's just some thoughts that's come in our mind. But I hope I've said something today that's been a help. And so anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. And thank y'all for watching. I appreciate, like I said earlier, I appreciate all your comments and everything you've put on my videos, the comment wise. I really appreciate that. And so anyway, I'm gonna get out of this sun. It's blinded my eyes. And so y'all have a wonderful day, and thank you from Little NC Farmer.